Hi, everyone, and welcome to cybersecurity training on how to protect against phishing attacks. ValleyBox customers with government contracts, particularly those with the Department of Defense, must abide by cybersecurity rules and regulations. And by those cybersecurity rules and regulations, any of their subcontractors must also abide by those rules. So ValleyBox has to adhere to cybersecurity regulations as well. One of ValleyBox's main vulnerabilities is you guys with email accounts and hackers doing what's known as a phishing attack using email. So a phishing attack is a technique used to fraudulently obtain usernames, passwords, credit card numbers, and or other sensitive information. Fraudulent emails typically ask you to open an attachment, click on a link, and it redirects you to a malicious website that may look like the normal website. And you may be prompted to enter personal information, or you may be asked to perform a task that would be like sending money or sending gift cards. So phishing, pronounced the way I've been saying it, it's carried out over email, social media, and other messaging apps. There is also phone or VoIP phishing occurring now. So the basic attack attempts to trick the recipient into handing over personal information. The recipients are tricked into sending their sensitive information via email, clicking on a link on a website, and then entering your sensitive information there, or downloading a file which will inadvertently install malware or ransomware, which would be a really big deal at work because we're all on a network. So it would infect everybody if you downloaded that. So you might be asking, what kind of data is personal data? Well, it's everything you could probably think of: your email address, your passwords, your credit card details, online banking credentials, date of birth, address, social security number. All of those things would be considered personal data, especially when used together. So the anatomy of a phishing email is that it typically contains a link or a fishy attachment. There's typically some poor grammar or spelling, requests personal or sensitive information that the email requester may not normally ask for. So your bank saying, hey, it's your bank, please enter your login information so we can, do some two-factor authentication. Typically, they're not going to ask for something like that in an email. The phishing email will typically have a high sense of urgency and or privacy. It's going to discuss confidential subjects like salaries, potentially, and it'll sometimes incentivize through a threat or reward-based system. So the types of phishing attacks, they actually name them here, and they stay in line with the whole aquatic analogy. So there is spear phishing, which is a highly targeted form of phishing that hones in on a specific group of individuals or organization. Whaling is a form of phishing targeting executive level individuals. And cloning, whereby a legitimate email is duplicated, but the content is replaced with a malicious link or attachment. Around 135 million phishing attacks are attempted every day. So think about the amount of spam that you get. Everybody's getting it. Everybody's being asked to click on these links. We're not just being targeted because we're a company. These rules also apply to your personal email accounts. So let's look at some examples of some actual phishing attacks we have gotten as a company. So this is the process this payment email. It targets individuals with purchasing authority. The target will receive an email from an attacker, which is disguised to look as if it comes from a C-level executive or a company. And after a period of small talk, perhaps, to build trust, then it will request for you to purchase or transfer money. Let's take a look at some of the examples on the right. So on the right, you will see that this email is from Cynthia in our accounting department, and it was sent to one of our customers. So some of the red flags here, what they've done is they've cloned Cynthia's email, and they've sent this to Kathleen on Cynthia's behalf. So the first thing is the odd subject line, that it says external and it's in all caps. That's not necessarily a super red flag, but the combination of all these red flags should give you an indication it's a phishing attack. So it just says good morning. It's not addressed to Kathleen. And then you start to see some grammar errors. No spacing after the period runs into the next sentence, a lowercase I, no period at the end. So really, there's not a whole heck of a lot here to indicate to Kathleen that this is a phishing email. But it does try to get her to update the ACH transfer information and send those bank details, which would be private information. So the combination of the weird subject line, the lack of a greeting, the grammar errors, the sense of urgency, and the request for private information would lead Kathleen to think that this was a phishing email. On the bottom, you'll see that there was an email to Diana. So we'll go through the issues with this. So the from sender, first of all, the email address was not spoofed accurately. So it just says that it's from Alicia, but if you look at the actual email address, you will know that that is not my email address. The second thing is the non-specific subject line. Typically, when you get emails from myself, I'm quite specific in the subject line, so that is out of character for the sender. Hello, Diana. There's a space after her name, not, a big red flag, but this is instilling a sense of urgency. Are you available? Get back to me as soon as this message is received. I need you to handle a purchase ASAP. P.S. I'm busy now and can't talk. Just reply back. So this person is encouraging her to do something expeditiously and to not call Alicia. Also, there was no signature line. So that is a process this payment example. The next example is a coworker's request. A target for this is organizations that have multiple employees who would be assuming to be getting an email from a coworker. The attacker poses as someone from Valley Box or one of our suppliers and will ask you to send sensitive information, payment, or download a attachment. Hackers have also been known to hijack legitimate business email communications, then attempt to pose as the person being messaged originally. So what that would mean is that maybe Linda and Cynthia have been discussing invoices for quite some time, and then the hijacker steps in saying, here's that invoice we were discussing. So let's take a look at that email on the right. First of all, Linda's email is not correct. That is the first thing you should always check is the email. We'll give you some tips and tricks later if that's not showing for you. The next one is that Outlook is actually issuing a warning in this situation. It says the actual sender of this message is different than the normal sender. There is a suspicious attachment. There is an invoice in the form of a Word doc file. Moving down to the grammar errors in the body of the email, you will see that it just says dear, comma. It does not say dear Cynthia. And the information at the bottom, the signature is not Linda's typical signature. So those are some of the warning signs you might see with a coworker request. Next, we have the verify your purchase email. The target of these is usually online shoppers. The attackers claim to be from a bank or an online shop, and they're attempting to verify your purchase details, and they're going to want you to respond to get that purchase to continue going through. It's almost the threat-based where they're going to say, hey, your purchase is held up because we need you to confirm your credit card information. So victims are asked to enter personal details such as name, date of birth, address, bank details, credit card details, etc. So let's dissect this on the right. First of all, if you'll notice at the top of the screen, there is a pink warning. This might be a phishing message and is potentially unsafe. So trust your Outlook, trust your email platform. When it tells you things like this, be extra cautious. So first thing we check, who is it being sent from? I have PayPal, but I don't have PayPal in Australia, so that's definitely not good. The suspicious subject line, your account has been limited. And then there is a little bit of a bad grammar. It's hard to catch in here. Login should be one word. And what you guys should be doing is before clicking on any link, if you just simply hover over it, it's going to show the URL. I would expect this URL to be taking me to http://paypal dot something. This definitely does not look like a PayPal address. And a way to circumvent this would be to close this window, go to your browser, log on to PayPal how you would normally log on, and see if you have any messages in PayPal. Don't click on the link from the email. A couple of other examples are you've won a prize. The target is really any email address. Fake competitions such as lotteries or contests by retailers offering to win a voucher. In order to win the prize, the victims are asked to enter their details such as the name, date of birth, address, or bank details in order to claim. It usually seems very like the information you're providing might not be that private. But remember, it's the combination of all that private information that gives the hackers power. Next one is ensure your safety email. These ones have a special place in hell for hackers. These emails are targeting victims of a data breach or of victims of a mass pandemic from like COVID-19. The hackers will pose as a security professional, warning victims of compromise, and they ask you to ensure that your account is still secure by entering your account details into the handy link. Or maybe click on this link to buy something that you need during this pandemic. They're just trying to pose as some authority figure and scare you into clicking on a link. So by now, after all these examples, you're probably thinking, well, how do we protect against phishing attacks? So let's just go into what the stats are. 2 out of every 1,000 people will fall victim to a spear phishing attack. That doesn't seem like a whole heck of a lot, but this is digital, and a hacker could send out 20,000 emails in the same amount of time it takes to send one. So if 2 people do it out of 1,000, those are pretty good rate of return. Criminals earn $150,000 on average in profit, because they're not claiming this on their taxes, from spear phishing campaigns, and only $14,000 from mass phishing. Both of those sound like lucrative things to do to me if you have the skill set. So either way, they're making money and they're not being held accountable for it. 94% of targeted emails are trying to scam the potential victim through malicious attachments, while only 6% use links to trick them. So pretty much never, ever, ever open an attachment from somebody you don't know. Around 91% of cyber attacks start with an email of spear phishing origin. So how do you protect against it? Well, first of all, scrutinize the sender. We went over that. All emails come with details of the recipient and the sender. The sender can be spoofed, which means it's an imitation address. So if we look at the example below of Linda and Alicia, you will see that it features our name, but the email address is incorrect. So the spoofing that they are doing is of the name, not the email address. So look at the email information in the body and you will see the whole email address. If you don't see the email address, what you can do is forward the email, like hit the forward button. That's not going to get you in any trouble and as far as the links or the attachments. And once you've forwarded it, you can look down at the body of the email and see the whole email address. So sometimes they've spoofed it to an extent that you can't see the email address when you've just received it. So that's a little trick that you can do to reveal the email sender. Never open an attachment. Never click on a mysterious or unsolicited attachment. even if the message looks as if it came from someone within Valley Box. And the best way that we can avoid this within the company is to not do attachments. What you can do is actually do a link to where it is on the server. That way, there's no attachments flying around that we're suspicious of. And if we're following the protocol of hovering over the link before clicking on it, it should be very clear that it is going to our server and not to a malicious site. So if you think that the message might not be legitimate, contact the sender over the phone or in person rather than over email to ensure that they really did send it. So if I had emailed a purchaser and said, hey, I need you to buy $1,000 in tools and leave them outside of the curb, I will be by to pick those up. And they think, wow, that sounds really suspicious. Pick up the phone, send me a polo, send me a text, send me a call, use some other form of communication than email that a hacker would not have control over. Never click on a link. If you think a link is unsafe, you can check where it links by hovering over the link with your mouse. Not clicking on it, but just hovering over it. If the email was sent by a company that you do business with, rather than clicking on the link, you can open your web browser and navigate to the web portal by typing in the URL. And I discussed that earlier with the PayPal option. So if you get an email from your bank that's like, hey, click here, you have a message waiting in your inbox, hover over that link. If it's not really looking like where you think it's going to go, then just close your email browser, open up your internet browser and just navigate to your bank how you normally would and bypass the link. So in the example below, it's about new OEHA regulations, which happens to be about Prop 65, and hover over it, and I can see that it's going to p65warnings.ca.gov. That definitely looks like a legitimate link. If I was really concerned about it, I could just open a browser and go to the p65warnings.ca.gov and just navigate there organically. At a technical level, disabling macros from being run on computers in your network can play a big part in protecting employees from attacks. Most newer versions of Office will automatically disable macros, but if they aren't or you want to double check, follow these instructions. Click the File tab, click Options, click Trust Center, then click Trust Center Settings. In the Trust Center, you will see the macro settings and make the selection that you want, which should be disable all macros without or with notification, depending on your preference. Use your sixth sense. If it feels suspicious, if you're just like, oh, I really don't know what to do here, pick up the phone and call the sender to find out if the email is real. With our cybersecurity plan, nobody should be offended that you've done this. They should be thankful that you're taking the extra precaution. The reason that you don't reply to the email is because the attacker will do everything in their power to assure you that the communication is legitimate. They will say things like, I'm in a meeting, just do what I'm asking. I can't talk on the phone right now. They might become quite terse and instill the fear of God in you. Our protocol is to pick up the phone and call. So that should be a sign right there that the email is not legitimate because the attacker is saying, oh, bypass our security measures and just do it. Next one is training, and more training. It might seem like a simple idea, but training is effective. Teaching staff what to look out for when it comes to a phishing email can go a long way to protecting ValleyBox from cyber attacks. So be like Chuck Norris or Bruce Lee and train. And last but not least, Outlook does a fantastic job of identifying these types of mail, and it puts it in your junk. If you find these things in your junk, there is no need to report it because Outlook is already doing its job. So thank you all very much for being a part of our annual refresher course for cybersecurity training on how to spot a phishing attack. Have a great day. Don't click on links, don't open attachments, and call when in doubt.